Law 6. Court attention at all cost. Everything is judged by its appearance. What is unseen counts for nothing. Let yourself get lost in the crowd, then or buried in oblivion. Stand out, be conspicuous at all cost. Make yourself a magnet of attention by appearing larger, more colorful, more mysterious than the bland and timid masses. Part 1. Surround your name with sensational and scandalous. Draw attention to yourself by creating an unforgettable, even controversial image. Court scandal. Do anything to make yourself seem larger than the life and shine more brightly than those around you. Make no distinction between kinds of attention. Notoriety of any sort will bring you power. Better to be slandered and attacked than ignored. Observation of the law. P.T. Barnum, American's premier 19th century showman, started his career as an assistant to the owner of the circus, Aaron Turner. In 1836, the circus stopped in Annapolis, Maryland for a series of performances. On the morning of opening, Barnum took a stroll through town wearing a new black suit. People started to follow him. Someone in the gathering crowd shouted out that he was the Reverend Ephraim K. Avery, infamous as a man acquitted of the charge of murder, but still believed guilty by most Americans. The angry mob tore off Barnum's suit and was ready to lynch him. After desperate appeals, Barnum finally convinced them to follow him to the circus where he could verify his identity. Once there, old Turner confirmed that this was all a practical joke. He himself had spread the rumor that Barnum was Avery. The crowd dispersed, but Barnum, who had nearly been killed, was amused. He wanted to know what could have induced his boss to play such a trick. My dear Mr. Barnum, Turner replied, it was all for our good. Remember, all we need to ensure success is notoriety. And indeed, everyone in town was talking about the joke, and the circus was packed that night, and every night it stayed in Annapolis. Barnum had learned a lesson he would never forget. Barnum's first big venture of his own was the American Museum, a collection of curiosities located in New York. One day, a beggar approached Barnum in the street. Instead of giving him money, Barnum decided to employ him. Taking him back to the museum, he gave the man 5 bricks and told him to make a slow circuit of several blocks. At certain, he was to lay down a brick on the sidewalk, always keeping 1 brick in hand. On the return of the journey, he was to replace each brick on the street with one he held. Meanwhile, he was to remain serious of countenance and to answer the question. Once back at the museum, he was to enter, walk around inside, then leave through the back door and make the same bricklaying circuit again. On the man's first walk through the streets, several people watched his mysterious movements. By his fourth circuit, onlookers swarmed around, debating what he was doing. Every time he entered the museum, he was followed by people who bought tickets to keep watching him. Many of them were distracted by the museum's collections and stayed inside. By the end of the first day, the brick man had drawn over 1,000 people into the museum. A few days later, the police ordered him to cease and desist from his walks. The crowds were blocking traffic. The bricklaying stopped, but thousands of New Yorkers had entered the museum, and many of those had become P.T. Barnum's converts. Barnum would put a band of musicians on a balcony overlooking the street beneath a huge banner proclaiming free music for the millions. What generosity, New Yorkers thought, and they flocked to hear the free, and soon after the band struck up, people would hurry to buy tickets to the museum where they and many of those had become P.T. Barnum converts. Barnum would put a band of musicians on a balcony overlooking the street beneath a huge banner proclaiming free music for the millions. What generosity! New Yorkers thought, and they flocked to hear the free concerts. But Barnum took pains to hire the worst musician he could find, and soon after the band struck up, people would hurry to buy tickets to the museum, where they would be out of the earshot of the band's noise and the booing of the crowd. One of the first oddities Barnum toured around the city was Joyce Heth, a woman he claimed was 161 years old and whom he advertised as a slave who had once been George Washington's nurse. After several months, the crowd began to dwindle, so Barnum sent an anonymous letter to the papers claiming that Heth was a clever fraud. Joyce Heth, he wrote, is a human being but an automaton made up of whalebone, India rubber, and numberless springs. Those who had not bothered to see her before were immediately curious, and those who had already been seen her paid to see her again to find out whether the rumor that she was a robot was true. In 1842, Barnum purchased the carcass of what he was purported to be a mermaid. This creature resembled a monkey with a body of a fish, but with the head of the body, but the head and the body were perfectly joined. It was only truly a wonder. After such some research, Barnum discovered that the creature had been expertly put together in Japan, where the hoax had cost quite a steer. He nevertheless planted articles in newspaper about the country, claiming that the capture of a mermaid in Fiji Islands. He also sent the paper woodcut prints of paintings showing mermaids. By the time he showed the specimen in his museum, a national debate had been sparked over the existence of these mythical creatures. A few months before Barnum's campaign, no one had cared or even known about mermaids. Not everyone was talking about them as if they were real. Crowds flocked in record numbers to see the Fiji mermaid and to hear debates on the subject. A few years later, Barnum toured Europe with General Tom Thumb, a 5-year-old dwarf from Connecticut whom Barnum claimed was an 11-year-old English boy and whom he had trained to do so many remarkable acts. During his tour, Barnum's name attracted such attention that the Queen Victoria, that paragon of sobriety, requested a private audience with him and his talented dwarf at Buckingham Palace. The English press may have ridiculed Barnum, but Victoria was royally entertained or was royally entertained by him and respected him ever after. Interpretation. So Barnum understood the fundamental truth about attracting attention. Once people's eyes are on you, you have a special legitimacy. For Barnum's creating interest meant creating a crowd, as he later wrote, every crowd has a silver lining, and crowds tend to act in conjunction. If one person stops to see you beggarman laying bricks in the street, more will do the same. Gather like 8 dozen bunnies, then given a gentle push, they will enter your museum or watch your show. To create a crowd, you have to do something different and odd. Any kind of curiosity will serve the purpose, for crowds are magnetically attracted by the unusual and unexplicable. And once you have their attention, never let it go. If it veers towards other people, it does so at your expense. Barnum would ruthlessly suck attention from his competitors, knowing what a valuable commodity it is. At the beginning of your rise to the top, then spend all your energy on attracting attention. Most important, the quality of the attention is irrelevant. No matter how badly his shows were reviewed or how slanderously personal were the attacks on his hoaxes, Barnum would never complain. A newspaper critic reviled him particularly bad. In fact, he made sure to invite the man to an opening and give him the best seat in the house. He would even write anonymous attacks on his own work just to keep his name in the paper. From Barnum's vantage, attention, whether negative or positive, was the main ingredient of his success. The worst fate in the world for a man who yearns fame, glory, and of course power is to be ignored. If your courtier happens to engage in arms in your public spectacles such as jousting, he will ensure that the horse he has is beautifully caparisoned, that he himself is suitable attired with appropriate mottos and ingenious devices to attract the eye of the onlookers in his direction as surely as the loudstone attracts iron. By Baldassare Castiglione, 1478 1529. Keys to power. Burning more brightly than those around you is a skill that no one is born with. You have to learn to attract attention as surely as the lodestone attracts iron. At the start of your career, you must attach your name and reputation to a quality, an image that sets you apart from the other people. This image can be something like a characteristic style of dress or personality quirk that amuses people and gets talked about. Once the image is established, you have a appearance, a place in the sky for your star. It is a common mistake to imagine that this peculiar appearance of yours should not be controversial, that to be attacked is somehow bad. Nothing could be further from the truth. To avoid being a flash in the pan and having your notoriety eclipsed by another, you must not discriminate between different types of attention. In the end, every kind will work in your favor. Barnum, we have seen, welcomed personal attacks and felt no need to defend himself. He deliberately courted the image of being a humbug. The court of Louis XIV contained many talented writers, artists, great beauties, and men and women of impeccable virtue, but no one was more talked about the singular Duc de Lauzun. The Duke was short, almost dwarfish, and he was prone to the most insolent kinds of behavior. He slept with the king's mistress and openly insulted not only other courtiers but the king himself. Louise, however, was so beguiled by the duke's eccentrics, eccentricities that he would not bear his absences from the court. It was simple. The strangeness of the duke's character attracted attention. Once people were enthralled by him, he wanted him around at any cost. Society craves larger than life figures, people who stand above the general mediocrity. Never be afraid then of the qualities that set you apart and draw attention to you. Court controversy, even scandal, it is better to be attacked, even slandered, than ignored. All professions are ruled by this law, and all professionals must have a bit of the showman about them. The great scientist Thomas Edison knew that to raise money he had to remain in the public eye at any cost. Almost unimportant as the invention themselves was how we presented them to the public and the courted attention. Edison would design visually dazzling experiment to display his discoveries with electricity. He would talk to future invention that seemed fantastic at the time, robots, machines that could photograph thought, and he had no intention of wasting his energy on but that made the public talk about. He did everything he could to make sure that he received more attention than his great rival Nikola Tesla, who may actually have been more brilliant than he was, but whose name was far less than known. In 1915, it was rumored that Edison and Tesla would be jointly recipient of the year's Nobel Prize in Physics. The prize was eventually given to a pair of English physicists. Only later was it discovered that the prize committee had actually approached Edison, but he had not turned them down, confusing to share the prize with Tesla. By the time his fame was more secure than Tesla's, and he thought it's better to refuse the honor than to allow his rival the attention that would have come even from sharing the prize. If you find yourself in a lowly position that offers like opportunity for you to draw attention, an effective trick is to attack the most visible, most famous, most powerful person you can find. When Pietro Aretino, a young Roman servant boy of early 16th century, wanted to get attention as a writer of verses. He wanted to publish a series of satirical poems ridiculing the Pope and his intention for a pet elephant. The attack put Aretino in the public eye immediately. A slanderous attack on a person in position of power would have a similar effect. Remember, however, to use such tactics sparingly after you have the public attention when the act can wear thin. Once in the limelight, you must constantly renew it by adapting and varying your method of courting attention. If you don't, the public will grow tired and will take you for granted and will move on to a newer star. The game requires constant vigilance and creativity. Pablo Picasso never allowed himself to fade into the background. If his name was too attached to a particular style, he would deliberately upset the public with a new series of paintings that went against all expectations. Better to create something ugly and disturbing. He believed that to let viewers grow too familiar with his work, understand people superior to the person whose action they can predict. If you show them who is in control by playing against their expectations, you both gain their respect and tighten your hold on their fleeting attention. The image, the limelight, the actors who step into the brilliant light attains a heightened presence. All eyes are on him. There is room for only one actor at a time in the limelight's narrow beam. Do whatever it takes to make yourself its focus. Make your gestures so large, amusing, and scandalous that the light stays on you while the other actors are left in the shadows. Authority. Be ostentatious and be seen. What is not seen is as though it did not exist. It was light that first caused all creation to shine forth. Display fills up many blanks, covers up deficiencies, and gives everything a second life, especially when it's backed by the genuine merit. Baltasar Gracian, 1601-1658. Part 2. Create an air mystery. In a world growing increasingly banal and familiar, what seems enigmatic instantly draws attention. Never make it clear what you are about to do. Do not show all your cards. An air of mystery heightens your presence. It also creates anticipation. Everyone will be watching you to see what happens next. Use mystery to beguile, seduce, even frighten. Observation of the law. Beginning in 1905, rumors started to spread throughout Paris of a young Oriental girl who danced in a private home wrapped in veils that she gradually discarded. A local journalist who had seen her dancing reported that a woman from the Far East had come to Europe laden with perfume and jewels to introduce some of the richness of the Oriental color and life into the satiated society of European cities. Soon, everyone knew the dancer's name, Mata Hari. Early that year, in the winter, small and select audiences would gather in a salon filled with Indian statues and other relics while an orchestra played music inspired by Hindu and Javanese melodies. After keeping the audience waiting and wondering, Matahari would suddenly appear in a startling costume, a white cotton brassiere covered with Indian type jewels, jeweled bands at the waist supporting a sarong that revealed as much as it concealed, bracelets up the arm. Then Matahari would dance in a style no one in France had seen before. Her whole body swaying as if where she was in trance. She told her excited and curious audience that her dances told stories from the Indian mythology and Javanese folk tales. Soon, the cream of Paris and ambassadors from far off lands were competing for invitation to the salon where it was rumored that Matahari was actually performing sacred dances in the nude. About her, she told journalists that she was actually Dutch in origin but had grown up in the island of Java. She would also talk about time spent in India, how she had learned sacred Hindu dances there, and how Indian women can shoot straight, ride horseback, and are able of doing up logarithms and talk philosophy. By the summer of 1905, although few Parisians had actually seen Matahari dance, her name was on everyone's lips. As Matahari gave more interviews, the story of her origins kept changing. She had grown up in India. Her grandmother was the daughter of a Javanese princess. She had lived on the island of Sumatra, where she had spent her time horseback riding, gun in hand, and risking her life. No one knew anything about her, but journalists did not mind these changes in her biography. They compared her to an Indian goddess, a creature from the pages of Baudelaire, whatever the imagination wanted to see in this mysterious woman from the East. In August of 1905, Matahari performed for the first time in public. Crowd, Crowds thronging to see her on the opening night caused a riot. She had now become a cult figure, spawning many imitations. One reviewer wrote, Matahari personifies all the poetry of India. Its mysticism, its voluptuousness, its hypnotizing charm. Another noted if India possesses an unexpected treasure such all the Frenchmen will emigrate to the shores of the Ganges. Soon, the fame of Matahari and her sacred Indian dances spread beyond Paris. She was invited to Berlin, Vienna, Milan. Over the next few years, she performed throughout Europe, mixed with the highest social circles, and earned an income that gave her an independence rarely enjoyed by a woman of the period. Then, near the end of the World War I, she was arrested in France, tried, convicted, and finally executed as a German spy. Only during the trial did the truth come out. Matahari was not from Java or India, had not grown up in the Orient, did not have a drop of the Eastern blood in her body. Her real name was Margaretha Zell, and she came from the stolid northern province of the Friesland, Holland. Interpretation. When Margarita Zell arrived in Paris in 1904, she had a franc in her pocket. She was one of the thousands of beautiful young girls who flocked to Paris every year, taking work as artists, models, nightclub dancers, or vaudeville performers at the Folie Bergère. After a few years, they would eventually be replaced by younger girls, and would often end up the streets turning to prostitution or else returning to the town they came from, older and chastened. Zell had higher ambitions. She had no dance experience and had never performed in the theater. But as a young girl, she had traveled with her family and had witnessed local dances in Java and Sumatra. Zell clearly understood that what was important in her act was not the dance itself, or even her face or figure, but her ability to create an air of mystery about herself. The mystery she created lay not just in her dancing or her costumes or the stories she would tell, or her endless lies about her origins. It lay in an atmosphere enveloping everything she did. She was nothing you could say for sure about her. She was always changing, always surprising her audience with new costumes, new dances, new stories. This air of mystery left the public always wanting to know more, always wondering about her next move. Matahari was no more beautiful than many of the other young girls who came to Paris, and she was not a particularly good dancer. What separated her from the mass was what attracted and held the public's attention and made her famous and wealthy was her mystery. people are enthralled by mystery because it invites constant interpretation and they never tire of it. The mysterious cannot be grasped, and what cannot be seized and consumed creates power. Keys to power. In the past, the world was filled with terrifying and unknowable diseases, disasters, capricious depots, and the mystery of death itself. What we could not understand, we reimagine as myths and spirits. Over the centuries, though, we have managed, through science and reason, to illuminate the darkness. What was mysterious and forbidding has grown to familiar and comfortable. Yet this light has a price. In a world that is ever more banal, that has its mystery and myth squeezed out of it, we secretly graved enigmas, people or things that cannot be instantly interpreted, seized, and consumed. That is the power of the mysterious. It invites layers of interpretations, excites our imagination, seduces us into believing that it conceals something marvelous. The world has become so familiar and its inhabitants so predictable that what wraps itself in mystery will almost always throw the limelight to it and make us watch it. Do not imagine that to create an air of mystery, you have to be grand and awe inspiring. Mystery that is woven into your day to day demeanor and is subtle has that much power to fascinate and attract attention. Remember, most people are upfront, can be read like an open book, take little care to control their words or image, and are hopelessly predictable. By simply holding back, keeping silent, occasionally uttering ambiguous phrases, deliberately appearing inconsistent and acting odd in the subtleness of ways, you will emanate an aura of mystery. The people around you will then magnify that aura by constantly trying to interpret you. Both artists and con artists understand that the vital link between being mysterious and attracting interest. Count Victor Lustig, the aristocrat of the swindlers, played the game to perfection. He was always doing things that were different or seemed to make no sense. He would show up at the best in the limo driven by a Japanese chauffeur. No one had ever seen a Japanese chauffeur before, so this seemed exotic and strange. Lustig would dress in the most expensive clothing, but always with something a medal, a flower, an armband, out of place, at least in the conventional terms. This was seen not as a tasteless, but as a odd and intriguing. In hotels, he would be seen receiving telegrams at all hours, one after other brought him by his Japanese chauffeur. Telegrams he would tear up with the utter nonchalance. In fact, they were fakes, completely blank. He would sit alone in the dining room, reading a large and impressive looking book, smiling. People yet imagining aloof. Within a few days, of course, the entire hotel would be abuzz with the interest in this strange man. Reversal. In the beginning of your rise to the top, you must attract attention at all costs. But as you rise higher, you must constantly adapt. Never wear the public out with the same tactic. An air of a mystery works wonder for those who need to develop an aura of power and get themselves noticed. But it must seem measured and under control. Matahari went too far from her fabrication. Although the accusation that she was a spy was false, at the time it was a reasonable presumption because all her lies made her seem suspicious and nefarious. Do not let your air of mystery be slowly transformed into a reputation for deceit. The mystery you create must seem a game, playful and unthreatening. Recognize when it goes too far and pull back. There are times when the need for attention must be deferred, and when a scandal and notoriety are the last thing you want to create. The attention you attract must never offend or challenge the reputation of those above you, not at any rate if they are secure. You will seem not only paltry but desperate by comparison. There is an art of knowing when to withdraw or when to draw notice and when to withdraw. Lola Mendez was one of the great practitioners of the art of attracting attention, she managed to rise from a middle class Irish background to being the lover of Franz Liszt and the mistress of the political advisor of King Ludwig of Bavaria. In her later years, though, she lost her sense of proportion. In London in 1850, there was to be a performance of Shakespeare's Macbeth, featuring the greatest actor of the time, Charles John Keane. Everyone of the consequence of the English society was to be there. It was rumored that even Queen Victoria and Prince Albert were to make a public appearance. The custom of the period demanded that everyone be seated before the Queen arrived. So the audience got there a little early, and then the Queen entered her royal box. They observed the convention of standing up and applauding her. The royal couple waited, then bowed. Everyone sat down and the lights were dimmed. Then suddenly all eyes turned to a box opposite Queen Victoria. A woman appeared from the shadows, taking her seat later than the Queen. It was Lola Montes. She wore a diamond tiara on her dark hair and a long fur coat over her shoulders. People whispered in amazement as the ermine cloak was dropped to reveal a low-necked gown of crimson velvet. By turning their heads, the audience could see that the royal couple deliberately avoided looking at Lola's box. They followed Victoria's example, and for the rest of the evening, Lola Montes was ignored. After that evening, no one in fashionable society dared to be seen with her. All her magnetic powers were reversed. People would flee her sight. Her future in England was finished. Never appear overly greedy for attention, then for its signal insecurity, and insecurity drives power away. Understand that there are times when it is not your interest to be the center of attention. When in the presence of a king or a queen, for instance, or for the equivalent thereof, bow and retreat to the shadow. Never compete.